I never believed in Christmas miracles until that frozen December that changed everything. My name is Margaret. I am 63 years old, and for a long time I thought my life had ended on the day I buried my husband. But I was wrong. Life still had plans for me. Plans that began with a grocery bag falling onto a snow-covered sidewalk and a dark-eyed boy who appeared out of nowhere when I needed it most. It was December 21st. I remember because it had been exactly 3 years since Richard passed away. 3 years since cancer took the man who had been my partner for 41 years. 3 years since my house stopped being a home and became just a quiet space where I existed without truly living. People always say time heals, but no one mentions that sometimes time simply teaches you how to walk with the pain, to carry it like a heavy backpack you can never take off. I was leaving the grocery store that afternoon, carrying 4 heavy bags. I always bought too much, a habit from when Richard was alive, and I cooked full meals every day. Now, half the food spoiled in the refrigerator because I could barely eat. Still, I kept shopping as if he were still there, as if at any moment I might hear him walk through the door calling my name with that deep, warm voice that made me feel safe. The wind cut against my face as I stepped outside. December in Boston can be cruel, and that year it was especially unforgiving. The snow had started falling that morning, and now covered everything with a white, deceptively beautiful layer. Deceptive because beneath that beauty, the sidewalk was treacherous, slick, dangerous for a woman my age, with knees that already complained with every step. I should have asked for help. The young clerk at the store had offered to carry the bags to my car, but I refused. I always did. Pride, maybe, or stubbornness. Richard used to say I was stubborn as a mule, always with that smile that made it impossible to be mad at him. God, how I missed that smile. I was halfway across the parking lot when it happened. My right foot slipped on invisible ice beneath the snow. I did not fall, thank God, but I lost my balance for one crucial second. One of the bags slipped from my hand, that brown paper bag the store still used, and crashed to the ground with a dull thud. I heard the sound of glass breaking. The tomato sauce, probably. Or maybe the cheap wine I had bought to pretend I would celebrate Christmas. I stood there staring at the fallen bag, at the red liquid beginning to seep through the soaked paper and spread across the snow like blood. And suddenly, without warning, I began to cry. Not just a few quiet tears, but deep sobs that came from somewhere deep in my chest, a place I had carefully locked away for the past 3 years. I was crying over a grocery bag. But in truth, I was crying over everything. Over Richard. Over the loneliness. Over another Christmas I would have to face alone. Over waking up every morning and having to invent reasons to get out of bed. And if you are listening to me now, I need you to know that this story goes places you might not expect. It will hurt a little, but it will also heal. It will make you question things, but it will also restore something inside you. So if you can, please subscribe to the channel, because stories like this need to be told and heard. Leave a like, not just for me, but for everyone who feels alone this Christmas. And please comment where you are watching from, what country, what city. Sometimes just knowing we are not alone in this world is already a small miracle. It was while I stood there in the snow, crying over a grocery bag, that I heard his voice for the first time. "Ma'am, are you okay?" It was a young voice, gentle but steady. I looked up, wiping my tears with the back of my gloved hand, and saw a boy standing a few feet away from me. He must have been 12, maybe 13. Too thin, the kind of thin that comes from not eating enough, not from genetics. He wore a light jacket that was clearly not suitable for a Boston winter, worn jeans, and sneakers with holes where I could see his wet socks. But it was his eyes that held my attention. Large, dark, deep. Eyes that had seen too much for someone his age. Eyes that knew sadness, but still held something precious inside them. Something I had lost and did not even know I was looking for until that moment. "I'm fine," I lied, my voice coming out rough and broken. I just dropped a bag." He did not say anything for a moment, just watched me with those piercing eyes. Then, without asking permission, he walked over to the fallen bag and crouched down in the snow. His hands, red and cracked from the cold, carefully began gathering the items that had spilled out: the can of corn, the bag of rice, the jar of tomato sauce that, miraculously, had not broken. It was the wine that had shattered, staining everything around it. "Let me do that," I said, trying to step closer. But he raised one hand. "Please, ma'am, let me help. The ground is very slippery. You could fall." There was something in the way he spoke, a genuine kindness mixed with real concern, that made me stop. I stood there holding my other 3 bags, watching this unknown boy pick up my groceries with a care that broke my heart in a different way. When was the last time someone had shown that kind of care toward me? When was the last time someone had truly seen me? He put everything back into the bag, ignoring the red stain now soaking through the paper. Then he stood up, holding the bag against his chest, and looked at me with an expression I could not quite read. "Where is your car, ma'am?" "Over there." I pointed to my old Volvo parked 3 rows ahead. "But you don't have to. I want to help," he interrupted softly. "Please." And there was something in the way he said it, an almost desperate urgency beneath the politeness, that made me nod. We began walking together across the snow-covered parking lot, him adjusting his pace to my slow, careful steps. I wanted to say something, to fill the silence with small talk, but the words would not come, so he spoke first. "I saw you crying," he said quietly. "I'm sorry if I'm being intrusive. It just looked like you needed help." I was having a hard day, I admitted, surprising myself with my own honesty. Normally I built walls around my emotions, kept everything locked away, presented the world with a woman who was coping just fine. But there was something about this boy that made it impossible to lie. "My husband died 3 years ago. This time of year is hard." He nodded, and I saw something pass through his eyes: recognition, understanding, shared pain. "My dad died too," he said, his voice nearly lost in the wind. 2 years ago. "My mom, she tries to be strong, but I know she cries at night when she thinks I'm asleep." My heart tightened. We reached my car, and I opened the trunk. He placed the damaged bag inside carefully, as if he were handling something precious. I set the other 3 beside it. Then we turned to face each other, and for a moment, we just stood there. 2 people marked by loss, recognizing each other through the pain. "What's your name?" I asked. "Ethan," he replied. "Ethan Parker." "Margaret," I said, extending my hand. He shook it, and even through the gloves I could feel how cold his hands were. "You should be wearing gloves, Ethan, and a better coat. You'll catch pneumonia." He shrugged, trying to look casual, but there was resignation in the gesture. "This is the only coat I have. It's okay. I can handle the cold." Something inside me cracked a little more. I looked at this boy, this stranger who had appeared out of nowhere to help me, who carried his own pain with a dignity that made me ashamed of my self-pity. And I made an impulsive decision, the kind of decision Richard would have approved of. "Ethan," I said, opening my purse, "thank you for helping me. Let me give you something for your time." But before I could pull out my wallet, he stepped back, shaking his head firmly. "No, ma'am, I don't want money. I just wanted to help." "But you need a better coat and—" "No," he repeated, more firmly this time. There was pride in his voice, the same stubborn pride I recognized in myself. "I didn't help you for money. I helped because it was the right thing to do." We stood there for a moment in a kind of stalemate. Then he gave a small smile, a smile that lit up his face in a way that made my heart ache. "Merry Christmas, Mrs. Margaret," he said, and started to walk away. "Wait," I called out, but he was already heading back across the parking lot, his hands shoved into the pockets of his thin jacket, his shoulders hunched against the wind. I watched until he disappeared around the corner, and only then did I realize I was still holding my wallet in my hand. I got into the car and sat there for a long time, the engine running, the heater working to chase the cold from my bones. But it was not just the winter cold I was feeling. It was something deeper, more unsettling. That boy had stirred something inside me, had opened a door I had kept carefully locked. I drove home on autopilot, my mind returning again and again to Ethan, to his sad eyes, to his inadequate coat, to the way he had refused money with such dignity, to the fact that he had lost his father and was clearly struggling, yet had still found it within himself to help a crying stranger in a parking lot. When I arrived home, the large Victorian house Richard and I had bought 35 years earlier, I entered through the back door as I always did. The house was quiet, cold despite the central heating. I had not decorated for Christmas. It did not seem to matter. Who would see the decorations besides me? Who would care? I placed the bags on the kitchen counter and began putting the groceries away mechanically. That was when I noticed something strange. In the bag Ethan had carried, the one that had fallen and been stained with wine, there was something that did not belong there, something I had not bought. It was a wallet, a worn, clearly old brown leather wallet wedged between the bag of rice and the can of corn. My heart began to race. I picked up the wallet with trembling hands and opened it. Inside were $27 in crumpled bills, a school ID card with Ethan's photo, confirming that he was 13 years old and attended Lincoln Middle School, and a small, faded photograph of a man and a woman holding a baby. The man had the same deep eyes as Ethan. The woman smiled at the camera with radiant happiness. The baby was clearly Ethan. But it was what was written on the back of the photograph that made me sink heavily into one of the kitchen chairs. In careful handwriting, slightly faded with time, it read, "Our family, always together, even when apart. I love you, my son, Dad." I was holding not just a wallet. I was holding Ethan's only tangible connection to his late father. I was holding his $27, which was probably all the money he had in the world. I was holding something he must have dropped while helping me, while he was more concerned about a sad stranger than about his own belongings. And in that moment, sitting in my empty kitchen, staring at that worn wallet with its $27 and precious photograph, something inside me woke up. For the first time in 3 years, I felt something other than pain and loneliness. I felt purpose. I had to find Ethan. I had to return his wallet. But more than that, a voice whispered in the back of my mind, maybe I could do more. Maybe the universe, or God, or fate, or whatever you believe moves things in this world, had placed that boy in my path for a reason. What would you do in my place? If you found the wallet of someone who clearly desperately needed that money, someone who had helped you without expecting anything in return, how would you respond? Would you simply return the wallet, or would you see in it an opportunity to do something greater? I picked up my phone and started searching. Lincoln Middle School. I looked up the address, wrote down the phone number, but it was Friday night, and the school would be closed until Monday. Monday was Christmas Eve. I could not wait that long. Ethan was probably frantic, searching for his wallet, worried about the money he had lost. Then I remembered. Inside the wallet, there had been a student bus pass, and on the back, written in pen, was an address, 428 Morton Street, Apt 3B. Probably his home. I could go there, return the wallet, maybe meet his mother, thank Ethan properly. But something stopped me. It was not fear exactly. It was the sense that I needed to think this through, that there was a right way and a wrong way to proceed, and I needed to understand the difference. That night, for the first time in months, I did not go straight to bed after a lonely dinner of canned soup. Instead, I sat in the living room, that room filled with furniture Richard and I had chosen together, surrounded by photographs of a life that no longer existed. And I held Ethan's wallet in my hands, thinking, I thought about loneliness, about pride, about how sometimes the people who need help the most are the ones most reluctant to accept it. I thought about Richard, about how he had always been generous, always looking for ways to help people without making them feel small or indebted. He had a special gift for that, for giving in a way that honored the dignity of the person receiving it. And I thought about myself, about how over the past 3 years I had shut down, building walls around my heart, telling myself I was protecting what was left of me. But in truth, I was only withering, shrinking, fading a little more each day. Life had given me a second chance to truly live, not just exist, and I was wasting every precious moment. That night, lying in the bed that felt far too large without Richard beside me, I made a decision. I would go to Ethan's address the next day. I would return his wallet, but I would also do something more. Something Richard would have done. Something that might, perhaps, make a difference not only in Ethan's life, but in my own as well. On Saturday morning, I woke up with a sense of determination I had not felt in years. I took a long shower, chose my clothes carefully, something warm but appropriate. I ate a real breakfast, not just coffee and burnt toast. And then, with Ethan's wallet safely tucked into my purse, I drove through the streets of Boston toward Morton Street. The closer I got to the address, the more the neighborhood changed. The pretty, well-kept houses of my area gave way to cramped apartment buildings, many of them showing signs of neglect. Rusted cars parked along the streets, trash piled up in some corners. It was the kind of place people call bad, but which is really just poor, where hard-working people struggle to survive on wages that do not keep up with the cost of living. Number 428 was a 4-story red brick building with external metal staircases leading to the upper apartments. I parked on the street and sat there for a moment, staring at the building, wondering if I was doing the right thing. Then I went up. Apartment 3B was on the 3rd floor, and the metal stairs creaked beneath my feet. Music was playing somewhere, and the smell of seasoned food drifted out from one of the doors. It was Saturday at noon, and the building was full of life, children playing in the hallways, voices echoing. I stopped in front of the door marked 3B and took a deep breath. Then I knocked. For a long moment, nothing. Then I heard footsteps, and the door opened a crack, held by a safety chain. Through the narrow opening, I saw the face of a woman. She must have been around my age, perhaps a little younger, but life had been harder on her than on me. She had tired eyes, brown hair pulled back into a ponytail, and a cautious expression. "Yes," she said, her voice carrying understandable caution. "Hello?" I began, suddenly nervous. "My name is Margaret Collins. I'm looking for Ethan Parker. Does he live here?" The caution in the woman's eyes intensified, turning into something close to alarm. "Why are you looking for my son? What did he do?" "Nothing," I hurried to say. "He didn't do anything wrong. Quite the opposite. He helped me yesterday, and he dropped something. I'm just trying to return it." The woman studied my face for a long moment, and I could see the calculation happening behind her eyes. Strangers showing up at the door were always suspicious, especially in neighborhoods like this. But something in my expression, or perhaps my age, or maybe simply her own inherent kindness, led her to make a decision. She closed the door, removed the chain, and opened it again. "Please, come in," she said, stepping aside. The apartment was small, probably 2 bedrooms by the look of it, but it was impeccably clean and organized. Old furniture, but well cared for. Curtains that had seen better days but still did their job. And on a small side table, a little artificial Christmas tree decorated with clearly handmade ornaments, many of them obviously made by a child. "Please, have a seat," the woman said, gesturing to the couch. "Can I offer you some coffee?" "No, thank you," I said, sitting down. "I don't want to take up your time. I just came to return this." I took the wallet out of my purse and placed it on the coffee table between us. The woman picked it up, and I watched her face change completely. Relief, so deep and intense it almost looked like pain, flooded her features. "Thank God," she whispered, pressing the wallet to her chest. "Thank God." Ethan came home last night completely distraught. He had lost his wallet, the money he had saved from small jobs he does here and there. He was crying. And Ethan never cries. Her face tightened at the memory, and I saw tears forming at the corners of her eyes. He kept saying he had ruined Christmas, that the money was for buying food for Christmas dinner, for getting me a small gift. I told him it didn't matter, that we would have a happy Christmas anyway, but I knew how much that money meant to him, how hard he had worked to save it. My heart was breaking. "Where is he now?" "He left early this morning," she said, wiping her eyes quickly, as if embarrassed by the tears. "He went to the store where he helped a woman yesterday to look for the wallet in the parking lot. He said he wouldn't come back until he found it." It was me. I was the woman he had helped. And now he was out there, in the brutal December cold, desperately searching for something I had had with me the entire time. Guilt hit me like a punch. "I need to find him," I said, standing up. "I need to tell him the wallet is here." But Ethan's mother gently touched my arm. "He'll come home when he gives up searching. Please, stay for a moment. I want to thank you properly. My son clearly helped you in some way. And now you've made this effort to return his wallet. That means more than you realize." I sat back down, and for a moment we simply sat there. Two women marked by loss, connected by a 13-year-old boy with a heart far bigger than his size. "My name is Sarah," she said, extending her hand. "Sarah Parker." "Margaret," I replied, shaking her hand. "And I'm the one who should be thanking Ethan. Yesterday, I was having a very hard day, and he showed up and was so kind, so attentive. He told me about your husband." Sarah nodded slowly, her hands tightening around the wallet in her lap. "Michael, my husband. He died 2 years ago. A work accident. He was an electrician, working on a commercial building when there was a wiring problem. They said it was instant, that he didn't suffer. But Ethan suffered. I suffered. We still suffer every day." "I understand," I said softly. "My husband died 3 years ago. Cancer. Sometimes I still wake up expecting to see him beside me." We looked at each other, and in that moment we were no longer strangers. We were sisters in grief, members of a club no one wants to join but recognizes its own instantly. "It's hard," Sarah said, her voice barely above a whisper. "It's hard being both mother and father. It's hard working 2 jobs and still barely making rent. It's hard watching your child grow up too fast, taking on responsibilities he should never have to take on. Ethan, he takes care of me, you know? A 13-year-old boy shouldn't have to take care of his mother, but he does. He works doing small jobs after school, saves every penny, tries to help me, and I hate it. I hate that he has to grow up so fast." My heart was completely shattered now. "Sarah," I began, but I didn't know what to say. "I'm sorry" sounds so small. "I'm sorry for your loss," empty words that change nothing. But then, an idea began to form in my mind, an idea that was maybe crazy, certainly impulsive, but felt right in a way I couldn't explain. Richard always said I should trust my intuition more, that the heart knows truths the mind takes too long to understand. "Sarah," I said again, more firmly this time, "may I ask you a question? What kind of jobs does Ethan do?" "You mentioned he works after school." She shrugged. "Small things. Helps neighbors carry groceries, shovels snow from sidewalks, delivers newspapers on weekends. Nothing big, but he's proud of the money he earns. He says he's contributing to the family." The idea in my mind was taking shape, becoming solid. "And you? You said you work 2 jobs." "Yes. I clean offices at a law firm during the day, from 8 to 4. Then I go straight to a restaurant where I work in the kitchen from 5 until midnight, 6 days a week. On Sundays, I stay home with Ethan, although many times I just sleep most of the day because I'm exhausted. She said it matter-of-factly, without self-pity, simply stating her reality. But I could hear the exhaustion in her voice, see the dark circles under her eyes that spoke of too little sleep and days blending into one another in a haze of endless work. "Sarah," I said, choosing my words very carefully, "may I tell you a little about myself, about my situation?" She nodded, curious. "My husband and I began. We never had children. Not by choice, it just didn't happen. Richard was a university professor, and I worked as a book editor. We lived comfortably, but we weren't wealthy. When he died, he left a good pension, life insurance, some investments. I have a large Victorian house that we bought decades ago when prices were reasonable, and I have loneliness, a great deal of loneliness." I paused, watching her reaction. She looked at me attentively, but there was caution in her eyes. "Yesterday, when Ethan helped me," I continued, "when he refused money with such dignity, when he was so kind to me at my lowest moment, something inside me woke up. For the first time in 3 years, I felt purpose. I felt connection. And now, meeting you, understanding your situation." I took a deep breath. "Sarah, I would very much like to help you in some way. I'm not yet sure exactly how, but perhaps we could talk about it. Maybe I could hire Ethan to do some work around my house. I have a garden that needs care, a garage full of boxes that need organizing. Real work, not charity." Sarah studied me for a long moment, and I saw something pass through her eyes. Hope, but also fear that it was too good to be true. "That's very kind of you," she said carefully. "But I don't want you to feel obligated because of the wallet." "I don't feel obligated," I said honestly. I feel like the universe has given me a second chance to do something meaningful. Richard always said that when you have the ability to help someone, you have the responsibility to do so, and I've been ignoring that responsibility for 3 years. Sarah opened her mouth to reply, but at that moment we heard the door open. We both turned to see Ethan coming in, his cheeks red from the cold, melting snow clinging to his hair. He stopped short when he saw me, his eyes widening in surprise. "Mrs. Margaret?" he said, his voice mixing confusion and concern. "What are you doing here? Is everything okay?" Sarah lifted the wallet, and I saw Ethan's face transform. His eyes filled with tears, which he tried to blink away quickly. "You found it," he whispered. You found my wallet." "Actually," I said gently, "it was in the bag you carried to my car. It must have fallen out of your pocket when you were helping me." Ethan walked slowly toward us and took the wallet from his mother's hands. He opened it, checked that everything was there, then looked at me with those deep eyes that seemed far too old for his young face. "Thank you," he said, his voice thick. "Thank you for bringing it back. I thought I had lost everything. I thought I had ruined Christmas." "You didn't ruin anything," I said firmly. "Ethan, you helped me yesterday when I was at my lowest. You were kind and careful and refused to accept anything in return. The least I could do was bring your wallet back." He nodded, wiping his eyes quickly with the back of his hand. Sarah looked at him, then at me, and I saw a decision forming in her eyes. "Margaret was telling me," Sarah began carefully, "that she has some work that needs to be done at her house. She was wondering if you might be interested." Ethan looked at me, and I saw hope shine in his eyes. "Really? What kind of work?" Before I could answer, Sarah continued, her voice becoming firmer. "But Ethan, you know we have to be careful about these things. We need to think this through." She looked at me, and there was apology in her eyes, but also resolve. "Margaret, you seem like a wonderful person, and I am deeply grateful that you brought Ethan's wallet back. But I need to be honest, Your offer is generous, but it's very sudden. I don't know you. I don't know anything about you beyond what you've told me. And as a mother, I have to protect my son." Her words stung, but I understood completely. In fact, I respected her even more for saying them. What responsible mother would accept help from a complete stranger, no matter how well-intentioned she seemed? "You are absolutely right," I said immediately. "Sarah, you are being a good mother by being cautious." I showed up out of nowhere with an offer that must seem strange, maybe even suspicious. If I were in your place, I would feel the same. I looked at Ethan, who was watching our exchange with a confused expression. "Ethan, your mother is right to be careful. We've just met, and even though I know my intentions are good, you and your mother have no way of knowing that for sure." I paused, thinking quickly. "But let me suggest something. Sarah, do you have a phone number? I can give you mine as well. We can talk over the next few days. You can ask questions. You can look into me if you want. I can give you references, the address of the church I attend, the name of my lawyer. You can verify everything." Sarah looked surprised, then relieved. That would be good. Thank you for understanding." "Of course," I said, opening my purse and searching for a card. I still had a few old business cards from when I was working. I found one and wrote my cell number on the back. "Call me whenever you want to talk. No pressure, no rush. And Ethan." I looked at the boy, who stood there looking disappointed but trying to hide it. "Thank you again for helping me yesterday. You have a good heart, and your mother should be very proud of you." "I am," Sarah said softly, wrapping an arm around Ethan's shoulders. "Very proud." I stood to leave, and Sarah walked me to the door. Before opening it, she touched my arm. "Margaret," she said quietly, "don't think I don't appreciate your offer. It's just that life has taught me to be careful, especially when something seems too good to be true." "I completely understand," I said sincerely, "and I respect you for it. Call when you're ready to talk, or don't call if you decide you don't want to. There is absolutely no obligation." I walked down the creaking metal stairs, got back into my car, and drove home. But this time, the loneliness of my house did not feel as crushing. There was something different now. There was possibility. There was human connection, however fragile it might be. If you were in her place, a single mother struggling to survive, would you trust a stranger who showed up offering help? Or would you think there must be some kind of trick, some hidden motive? 3 days passed. Sunday, Monday, Tuesday. Every day, I checked my phone obsessively, waiting for a call that did not come. I tried to keep myself busy, cleaning the house in a way I had not done in years, organizing closets, preparing proper meals. But my mind kept returning to Ethan and Sarah, wondering if I had been foolish to think I could make a difference in their lives. It was Christmas Eve, in the afternoon, when my phone finally rang, an unknown number. My heart leaped. "Hello? Margaret?" It was Sarah's voice, sounding nervous. "This is Sarah Parker. I hope I'm not calling at a bad time." "No, not at all," I said quickly, sitting down on the edge of the couch. "I'm glad you called. How are you both doing?" "We're okay," she said. "Look, I've thought a lot about your offer, and I talked to Ethan about it. He hasn't stopped talking about you, about how kind you were to him, about how sad you were and how he wanted to help." She paused, and I held my breath. "I did some research," she continued. "I looked your name up online. I found some articles about your husband, about his work at the university. I read your obituaries, and I'm sorry for invading your privacy like that, but I needed to know." "You don't need to apologize," I said. "You were doing what any responsible mother would do." "I also spoke with the pastor of the church you mentioned you attend," Sarah continued. "Reverend Thomas. He spoke very highly of you. He said you are an honorable woman, that your husband was a good man, and that you have been struggling since he died." Tears burned in my eyes. I hadn't realized Reverend Thomas had noticed my struggle. I thought I was hiding it well. "So," Sarah said, and I could hear both hope and fear in her voice, "if the offer is still open, Ethan would really like to do some work for you. He's on school break now, so he has time. And I would like to get to know you better as well. Maybe we could have coffee together." Relief and joy washed over me. "Sarah, the offer is absolutely still open, and I would love to have coffee with you. How about tomorrow? Christmas Day?" There was a pause. "You don't have plans for Christmas?" "No," I admitted. "It was going to be just me and a frozen dinner. But if you don't have other plans, I would love for you both to come to my house. I can make a real meal, show Ethan the house, and we can talk about what kind of work he could do." I could hear Sarah breathing on the other end of the line, imagining her weighing the decision. Then she said softly, "Ethan and I usually just have a simple dinner here. If you're sure we wouldn't be a burden." "You wouldn't be a burden," I said firmly. "You would be a gift, the best Christmas gift I could receive." And so it was settled. Sarah and Ethan would come for Christmas dinner at 1 in the afternoon. After I hung up the phone, I sat there for a long moment, simply feeling. For the first time in 3 years, I had something to look forward to. For the first time in 3 years, Christmas meant something other than pain and memories. I spent the rest of Christmas Eve preparing. I went to the store and bought a small turkey, ingredients for mashed potatoes, fresh vegetables, ingredients for apple pie. I cleaned the house from top to bottom. I put clean sheets on the guest beds, just in case. I even put up a few simple Christmas decorations I had stored away for years. A wreath on the front door, candles in the windows. And then, that night, on Christmas Eve, I did something I hadn't done in 3 years. I had an honest conversation with myself. And I whispered into the darkness of my bedroom, "I think I'm finally beginning to understand what Richard always tried to teach me, that life goes on, that we have a responsibility to the living. That love does not end, it simply changes form. I hope he is proud of me. I hope this is what you would have wanted." That night, I slept better than I had in years. Christmas morning dawned cold and bright, the sun shining on the snow that covered everything in a pristine white blanket. I woke early and began cooking. The turkey in the oven, potatoes peeled and ready to boil, the apple pie baking, filling the house with a scent that reminded me of Christmases past, when Richard was alive and the house was full of warmth and laughter. At 12:50, exactly 10 minutes before we had agreed on, I heard the doorbell ring. I quickly wiped my hands on my apron and went to answer the door. Sarah and Ethan stood on my porch, both dressed in their best clothes, which had clearly seen better days but were clean and neatly pressed. Sarah was holding a covered dish wrapped in foil. "Merry Christmas," I said, opening the door wide. "Come in, please. You must be freezing out there." "Merry Christmas, Margaret," Sarah said, stepping inside nervously. "I brought some rice pudding. It's my mother's recipe. I hope you like it." "I'm sure I will," I said, taking the dish. "And what a thoughtful gesture. Thank you." Ethan came in behind his mother, his eyes wide as he looked around the house. "Wow," he said softly. "Your house is beautiful, Mrs. Margaret." "Thank you, Ethan. And please, just call me Margaret. Mrs. makes me feel older than I already am." I helped them take off their coats and led them into the living room, where I had lit a fire in the fireplace and put on soft Christmas music playing quietly in the background. Sarah stopped at the entrance to the room, her eyes taking everything in, from the old furniture to the photographs on the walls. "You have a beautiful home," she said softly. "You can feel the love here. You can feel the history." "Thank you," I said, feeling a lump in my throat. "Richard and I made many memories here, and I hope to make some new ones as well." I spent the next few hours in a way I hadn't experienced in years. We talked while I finished preparing dinner. Sarah told me about her life, about how she and Michael met in high school, about how Ethan was born when she was only 22, about how they struggled but were happy, always happy, until an accident took everything from them. Ethan showed me some photos on his phone, pictures of his father, pictures of happier moments. And I shared my own stories about Richard, about our 41 years together, about how he died slowly while I watched, powerless to save him. It was a precious moment, that exchange of stories, that sharing of pain. And it was also healing, because at last I was talking about Richard with people who truly understood what it means to lose someone you love more than life itself. Dinner was wonderful. Not because the food was perfect, though it was good, but because for the first time in 3 years, my dining table was not empty. There was laughter, conversation, human connection. There was life. After dinner, as we ate apple pie with ice cream, I brought up the subject that had been on my mind. "Ethan," I said, "I want to talk seriously with you about the work I mentioned. I don't want this to feel like charity, because it isn't. These are real jobs that need to be done, and I am willing to pay a fair rate." Ethan leaned forward, giving me his full attention. "I have a large garden," I continued, "that has been completely neglected. In the spring, it will need a lot of work, planting, weeding, general maintenance. I have a garage full of boxes that need to be organized and some thrown out. I have sidewalks that need snow cleared during the winter. And frankly, I have a big house that is too much for one person to maintain alone." I looked at Sarah, including her in the conversation. "Sarah, I know you work 2 jobs and are exhausted. I thought perhaps you might consider leaving one of them and instead working for me a few hours a week as a housekeeper. Nothing strenuous, just help with cleaning, maybe some cooking if you're interested. I would pay well, and you would have flexible hours." The silence that followed was heavy. Sarah looked at Ethan, then at me, and I saw tears forming in her eyes. "Margaret," she said, her voice trembling, This is too much. It's very generous, but it feels, I don't know, it feels unreal. Why would you do this for us? We are strangers to you." "You are no longer strangers," I said simply. "And as for the why, well, I think I've already explained it. For the past 3 years, I've only been existing. You gave me a reason to live again. You reminded me that there is still goodness in the world, that human connections still exist, that there is still purpose to be found." I paused, choosing my next words carefully. But I also understand how frightening this is. It's a big change, and you need time to think about it. I don't need an answer today. Think it over, talk about it together, and when you're ready, let me know." Sarah wiped her eyes and nodded. "Thank you," she whispered. "Thank you for understanding." But it was Ethan who spoke next, his voice clear and steady. "I want to do this, Mom. I want to help Margaret. And you're so tired all the time. Maybe this is a blessing. Maybe Dad is watching over us." Sarah looked at her son, and I saw something crack inside her. That wall of caution and self-reliance she had built to protect herself began to crumble, revealing the vulnerable, exhausted woman beneath. "Maybe," she said softly, "maybe you're right." Then, as if remembering something important, Sarah straightened in her chair, her expression turning serious once more. "Margaret, I need to be honest with you about something that might change how you feel about helping us." My heart sank. What could it be? "There's a reason," Sarah continued, her voice lowering, "why I've been so cautious, why it's hard for me to accept help, even when I desperately need it." She glanced at Ethan, who nodded encouragingly, then looked back at me. "About 6 months after Michael died, I was completely lost, not just emotionally, but financially. His life insurance had been canceled a few months before the accident because we couldn't afford the premiums. We were behind on rent. I had just gotten the cleaning job, but it wasn't enough." She took a deep breath, her hands clenched tightly in her lap. A woman showed up. She said she was a social worker, that she had heard about our situation and wanted to help. She was so kind, so understanding. She offered money for rent, help with groceries, even clothes for Ethan. I was so grateful, so relieved. Sarah paused, and I saw tears begin to roll down her cheeks. But it wasn't free. She wanted something in return. She wanted me to be involved in something illegal, some kind of insurance fraud scheme. She said it was simple, that no one would get hurt, that it was just a big corporation with plenty of money. And I was so desperate, Margaret, so desperate that I almost said yes. My chest tightened. But you didn't. No, Sarah confirmed, wiping her eyes. At the last moment, I couldn't. I couldn't do something I knew was wrong, something Michael would have been ashamed of, so I refused. And that woman, she changed completely. She became cruel, threatening. She said I would regret it, that I had lost my only chance to survive. She looked at me with eyes full of pain and shame. Since then, I've been so afraid to trust anyone who offers help, afraid it's another trap, another trick. That's why I was so cautious with you. That's why I checked everything, because I've been fooled before, when I was at my most vulnerable. I stood, walked over to Sarah, knelt beside her, and took her hands in mine. Sarah, look at me, I said gently. She raised her eyes, vulnerable and afraid. You were not fooled. You were targeted by a predator who takes advantage of vulnerable people. And the fact that you refused, even when you were desperate, shows exactly the kind of person you are. It shows your strength, your character, your values. I squeezed her hands. I am not that woman. I want nothing from you except companionship, purpose, and the chance to do something good with what I have. There is no trick, no trap, just a lonely woman who saw in you and Ethan a chance to make her life meaningful again. Sarah broke down then, sobbing into my arms as years of tension, fear, and pain poured out of her. Ethan came over and wrapped his arms around his mother from the other side, and we stayed like that for a long time, 3 people bound by loss and pain, but also by hope and possibility. When Sarah finally calmed, she pulled back, wiping her face with the napkin I handed her. I'm sorry, she said hoarsely. I didn't mean to fall apart like that. Don't apologize, I said firmly. Sometimes we have to fall apart before we can rebuild. The rest of that Christmas afternoon passed in a warm haze. We talked more, laughed more, and slowly began making real plans. Ethan would start working at my house the next day, helping organize the garage. Sarah would seriously consider leaving her night job at the restaurant and working for me a few hours a week. When they finally left late that night, with leftovers packed up and promises to see each other soon, I stood at my door watching their figures disappear down the dark street. And for the first time in 3 years, I didn't feel alone. But what I didn't know, what none of us knew, was that someone was watching. Someone who would not be happy about this new friendship. Someone with his own plans, his own motives, and a frightening ability to cause trouble. His name was Robert Collins, and he was Richard's brother. I hadn't spoken to Robert in almost 2 years, since a horrible encounter a few months after Richard's funeral, when he made very clear what he thought of me and of the inheritance Richard had left me. Robert had always been bitter, always felt that Richard had gotten the easy life while he struggled, and when Richard died and left everything to me instead of splitting it with his brother, that bitterness turned into something far more toxic. Robert was a lawyer, the kind people hire when they want to bend the law without technically breaking it, financially successful. But his success came from representing people and companies that operated in ethical gray zones. And he had a particular talent for finding people's weaknesses and exploiting them. It was 2 days after Christmas when Robert showed up at my door. I was in the garage with Ethan, showing him how to organize the boxes that had piled up over the years. Ethan was working hard, asking smart questions, clearly proud to be earning his own honest money. I heard the doorbell and went to answer it, Ethan following behind me. When I opened the door and saw Robert standing there, my stomach dropped. He hadn't changed much. He still had that sharp face that resembled Richard's, but lacked the kindness that made Richard handsome. He still had those cold eyes that always seemed to be calculating, assessing, looking for angles. "Margaret," he said, his voice smooth but carrying something I couldn't quite place. "It's been a long time." "Robert," I replied cautiously. "What are you doing here?" "Can't I visit my sister-in-law?" he said, his smile not reaching his eyes. Then his gaze slid to Ethan behind me, and something shifted in his expression. "And who is this?" "This is Ethan," I said, instinctively placing a protective hand on the boy's shoulder. "He's helping me with some projects around the house." Robert studied Ethan with an intensity that made me uncomfortable. "Is that so? How interesting. He seems rather young to be working." "I'm 13, Ethan said, lifting his chin. "And I'm a good worker." "I'm sure you are," Robert replied, but something in his tone made my stomach tighten. He turned his eyes back to me. "Margaret, may we speak? In private?" Every fiber of my being wanted to refuse, to shut the door in his face, but something told me that if I did, he would just come back, and next time, he might not be so polite. "Ethan," I said, turning to the boy, "why don't you go back to the garage and keep working on those boxes in the left corner? I'll be back in a few minutes." Ethan looked at me with concern, clearly sensing the tension, but he nodded and returned to the garage. I led Robert into the living room, offering no coffee or hospitality. I wanted this conversation short. "What do you want, Robert?" I asked as soon as we sat. He leaned back on the sofa, completely at ease in a way that irritated me. "I heard through the grapevine that you've been making some new friends," he said casually. "A woman named Sarah Parker and her son." My blood ran cold. How did he know about Sarah and Ethan? I hadn't told anyone except Reverend Thomas when Sarah called to check my references. "How do you know about them?" I asked, keeping my voice steady despite the fear rising inside me. "I have my sources," Robert said with a shrug. "And when I heard that my widowed sister-in-law was suddenly spending time with a strange family, I got curious. So I asked a few questions." He leaned forward, his eyes locked on mine. "Do you know who Sarah Parker really is, Margaret? Do you know about her past?" "I know she's a hard-working widow trying to raise her son," I said defensively. "Oh, but there's more to the story, isn't there?" Robert said, his voice dripping with false concern. "You do know that a few months ago, she was investigated for possible involvement in insurance fraud." My heart stopped. "What?" "It's true," Robert said, clearly enjoying my reaction. "No charges were filed, of course, because there wasn't enough evidence. But the investigation happened. Your new friend was under suspicion of criminal activity, Margaret. And now you've brought her and her son into your life, into Richard's house, giving them access to everything." He paused, letting his words sink in. "I have to wonder, Margaret, what Richard would think of you being so naive, of you potentially risking everything he worked so hard to build." Anger exploded inside me, hot and fierce. "How dare you," I said, my voice low and dangerous, "invoke Richard's name for your petty games?" Sarah was a victim of a scam, not a perpetrator. She refused to participate when she realized what it was. That's why she was investigated, because the person who tried to recruit her likely reported her out of spite. Robert raised an eyebrow. "So she told you about that? Interesting. And you simply believed her?" "Yes," I said firmly. "I believed her because I looked into her eyes and saw truth, something you probably wouldn't recognize if it stared you in the face." He was silent for a moment. Then his face hardened. "You've always been foolish, Margaret, foolish and sentimental. Richard coddled you, protected you, let you live in a bubble where everyone is good and every intention is pure. But the real world doesn't work that way." He stood, preparing to leave. "I only came to warn you. As family, I feel it's my responsibility. This woman and her son will use you, take advantage of you, and when they're done, you'll be left heartbroken and with nothing. Don't say I didn't warn you." At the door, he turned back once more. "And Margaret, if you continue this, if you keep letting these people take advantage of you, I may have to take legal steps to protect the family's interests. Richard may have left everything to you, but that doesn't mean you have the right to waste his inheritance on con artists." Then he was gone, leaving me shaking with anger and, if I'm honest, a bit of fear as well. Ethan came in from the garage, his eyes wide. Who was that man? He looked angry. I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself. That was Robert, my late husband's brother, and yes, he was angry, but not at you or your mother. At me, for reasons that have nothing to do with you. Even as I said it, seeds of doubt began to creep in. What if Robert was right? What if I was being naive? What if Sarah and Ethan were using me? No. I shook my head, pushing those thoughts away. I knew Sarah. I knew Ethan. I saw genuine kindness in them, real struggle, honest gratitude. Robert was just trying to manipulate me, as he always had. But doubt, once planted, is hard to erase completely. That night, I called Sarah and told her about Robert's visit. She was silent for a long time after I finished. "He's right, you know," she finally said, her voice small. "About the investigation. I should have told you. I thought I had told you everything at Christmas, but I forgot to mention there was a formal investigation. It was brief, just a few days, and they concluded I'd done nothing wrong. But it happened." "Why didn't you tell me?" I asked, trying to keep accusation out of my voice. "Because I was ashamed," Sarah said, her voice breaking. "Because even though I was innocent, even though I did the right thing, I was still treated like a criminal, police in my home, questions, having to prove my innocence, and I knew that if I told you, you might doubt me, just like you're doubting me now." I couldn't deny it. I was doubting, even though I didn't want to. "Sarah," I began, but she interrupted me. "No, Margaret, let me finish. I understand if you want to reconsider our friendship, if you don't want Ethan to work for you anymore. You need to protect yourself, and I don't blame you, but I want you to know one thing." She paused, and I heard her take a deep breath. "You gave me hope again. You and your kindness, your generosity, your willingness to see the best in us when the rest of the world only sees our problems. You reminded me that there are still good people in the world. So even if this ends here, even if we never speak again, thank you. From the bottom of my heart, thank you." And then she hung up, before I could respond, before I could say the words forming in my mind. I sat with the phone in my hand for a long time, tears streaming down my face. Richard always said that the most important choices we make in life aren't between right and wrong, but between fear and love, between closing ourselves off to protect our wounds or opening ourselves despite the risk of being hurt again. Do you believe in second chances? Do you believe that when life places someone in your path, especially in such an unexpected and meaningful way, it's for a reason? Or do you think we should always protect ourselves first, always doubt, always build walls instead of bridges? That night, I dreamed of Richard. "You know what to do, Maggie," he said, using the nickname only he used. "You always have. You're just afraid to trust yourself." "But what if I'm wrong?" I heard myself ask in the dream. "What if they really are using me?" "And what if they aren't?" he replied. "What if they're exactly who they seem to be, good people in bad circumstances who need a helping hand? Would you rather live afraid of being fooled or risk your heart for the chance to make a real difference?" I woke with the sun rising, the answer clear in my mind and my heart. I grabbed the phone and called Sarah before I could second-guess myself. "Sarah," I said when she answered, her voice cautious and hesitant. "I'm so sorry. I'm sorry I doubted you, even for a moment. Robert poisoned my mind, but he was wrong. I know who you are. I know who Ethan is, and I won't let someone else's fear and bitterness destroy something good. I heard Sarah sob on the other end of the line. Are you sure? I've never been more sure of anything in my life, I said firmly. And by the way, I want to do more than just offer occasional work. I want to make a more substantial offer, if you're willing to listen. I'm listening, Sarah said, her voice trembling with cautious hope. My house has 6 bedrooms, I said. 4 are empty. You and Ethan could move in, no rent. You could leave both of your jobs and work for me full-time as housekeeper and household manager. I'd pay you a fair salary, more than you earn now at both jobs combined. Ethan would have his own room, a safe place to study and grow. And I would have a family again. The silence on the other end stretched so long I thought she had hung up. Then I heard her voice, barely above a whisper. Margaret, that's too much. It's too generous. I can't. Please don't say no right away, I interrupted. Think about it. Talk to Ethan. There's no rush. But know that the offer is real, and it comes from the heart. Why? Sarah asked, genuine confusion in her voice. Why would you do this for us? You saved me from dying of loneliness in an empty house. You saved me from wasting the years I have left merely existing instead of living. You gave me purpose, connection, hope. That's priceless, Sarah. Let me give something back. It took Sarah 3 days to give her answer. 3 days during which she clearly thought deeply, weighed every pro and con, and likely had long conversations with Ethan. And when she finally called, her voice was firm with decision. Yes, she said, we want to accept your offer, but with some conditions. Name them, I replied, my heart racing with joy and relief. First, we want a proper contract, written, legal, clear, not just to protect us, but to protect you as well. Second, you must allow us to pay some kind of rent, not much, but something. We can't live for free. It wouldn't be right. Third, if at any point any of us feels this isn't working, we need to be able to talk about it honestly and make changes or end the arrangement without resentment. I agree to all your conditions, I said without hesitation. And may I add one of my own, that we do this officially, with lawyers involved, so everything is above board. I want this done the right way, the legal way. That sounds perfect, Sarah said, and I could hear the smile in her voice. And so, on the 2nd day of January, Sarah and Ethan moved into my house. It took 2 days to move their belongings, which weren't many. Old furniture Sarah wanted to keep for sentimental reasons. Boxes of clothes, books, photographs, Ethan's precious treasures, including a baseball bat that had belonged to his father, a collection of history books, and an old guitar he had rescued from the trash and was teaching himself to play through YouTube videos. We settled Sarah into the largest guest room, with windows overlooking the backyard garden. Ethan chose a smaller but cozy room on the 2nd floor, with a skylight through which he could see the stars at night. And slowly, day by day, week by week, that large, silent house that had been my tomb for the past 3 years began to transform into a home again. But of course, Robert was not going to give up so easily. It was 2 weeks after Sarah and Ethan moved in that things truly escalated. I returned home from a trip to the pharmacy to find a strange car parked in my driveway, a sleek black sedan, the kind lawyers drive. My stomach dropped. Robert was sitting in the living room. Sarah stood in the doorway to the kitchen, her arms crossed defensively. Ethan was on the stairs, clearly told to go upstairs but refusing to go all the way, wanting to be there in case his mother needed him. "What are you doing in my house, Robert?" I asked, my voice icy. "Checking on my sister-in-law," Robert said, standing. "And I see my concerns were justified. They've already moved in. My God, Margaret, you haven't even known these people a month and you've already let them live in the house you and my brother built together." "This is my house," I said, each word sharp as glass. "My decision. and you have no right to come in here without being invited." "Actually," Robert said, pulling several papers from the inside pocket of his jacket, "I have every right. I am initiating legal proceedings to have you declared mentally incompetent to manage your own affairs. This erratic behavior, this impulsive decision to give your house to strangers, is clear evidence that you are not of sound mind." The floor seemed to vanish beneath my feet. "You can't do that. I can, and I am," Robert said, his eyes cold and calculating. "I have witnesses willing to testify that you have been unstable since Richard's death. I have evidence of your isolation, your depression, your refusal to seek professional help. And now I have proof of clearly irrational behavior, putting you and the family estate at risk." He gestured towards Sarah and Ethan. "These people took advantage of you during a moment of vulnerability. As Richard's only living relative, I have a responsibility to protect his interests, even from you." It was Sarah who spoke, her voice trembling but steady. "Mr. Collins, Margaret is not being taken advantage of. We have a legal agreement. We have—" "You want to talk legalities with me?" Robert turned to her, his face twisted with disdain. "I am a lawyer, Mrs. Parker. I know exactly how people like you operate. You find vulnerable victims, gain their trust, and slowly begin to take control. I've seen it hundreds of times." "Enough!" My voice exploded through the room, louder than I intended. Ethan jumped on the stairs but did not come down. "Enough, Robert. You are leaving my house now, or I will call the police." Robert laughed, a cold, bitter sound. "Go ahead. Call the police. It will just be more evidence of your deteriorating mental state. A 63-year-old woman, completely alone in the world, making wild accusations against the only relative trying to help her." He started toward the door, then stopped and turned back one last time. "You have two options, Margaret. You can cooperate with a voluntary psychiatric evaluation, or I can force it through the courts. Either way, you will be evaluated. And when you are declared incompetent, Richard's house, Richard's money, everything he built will be placed under the control of a guardian. And I will do everything in my power to make sure that guardian is me." "Get out," I whispered, my entire body shaking with fear and anger. "Get out now." He smiled, a smile with no warmth at all. "Happy New Year, Margaret. You'll be receiving the official papers soon." And then he was gone, leaving a heavy, toxic silence behind him. My legs finally gave out, and I collapsed onto the sofa. Sarah rushed to me, kneeling in front of me and taking my hands. "Margaret, I'm so sorry. So sorry. We caused this. We brought this trouble into your life." I looked at her, at Ethan slowly coming down the stairs, his eyes wide with fear and worry, and something inside me hardened. Not with anger, but with resolve. "No," I said firmly, "you didn't cause anything. Robert caused this. His greed, his bitterness, his resentment. He's been waiting for an opportunity to challenge Richard's will since the day of the funeral. You just gave him a convenient excuse." I squeezed Sarah's hands. "I won't let him win. I won't let him use you as a tool to get what he wants. And I certainly won't let him dishonor Richard's memory with tactics this vile." "But what are you going to do?" Ethan asked, his small voice trembling. "He's a lawyer. He has power." I looked at that brave boy who had grown up too fast, who carried responsibilities no child should have to bear, yet still held on to his kindness and sense of justice. And I knew exactly what to do. "I'm going to fight," I said simply. "I'll hire my own lawyer. I'll prove that I am perfectly sound, and I'll expose Robert for what he really is, a greedy man trying to manipulate the system to steal from me what his brother wanted me to have." In the days that followed, I put my plan into action. I hired an attorney, a brilliant woman named Patricia Chen, who had a reputation for dismantling frivolous cases. I voluntarily underwent a full psychiatric evaluation with an independent and highly respected psychiatrist. I gathered documents, bank statements, evidence that I was managing my finances and my life perfectly well. Patricia was clear about the situation. "Robert has a very weak case," she explained during our first meeting. "Declaring someone mentally incompetent requires an extremely high standard of proof. You would need to be clearly unable to manage your basic needs or present a danger to yourself or others. Making choices other people consider unconventional does not qualify." "But he can try," I asked. "He can try," Patricia confirmed, "and the process itself can be unpleasant, invasive, and publicly embarrassing. He's clearly counting on that to intimidate you into settling." "What kind of settlement?" "He likely wants a share of Richard's estate, maybe a lump sum, or maybe a percentage of everything. In exchange, he would drop the case and leave you alone." I shook my head. "I won't give him a cent. Richard had his reasons for leaving everything to me, and I will honor his wishes." Patricia smiled. "Good. Then let's show Mr. Collins exactly who he's dealing with." But while the legal battle unfolded, something else was happening, something none of us expected, but that would change everything. It was a cold January evening, about 3 weeks after Robert made his threats. Sarah, Ethan, and I were in the kitchen after dinner, Sarah washing dishes while Ethan dried and I put them away. It had become our routine, this time together at the end of the day, talking about what had happened, sharing stories, simply existing in one another's presence with a comfort that had grown naturally between us. "Margaret," Ethan said suddenly, his voice hesitant. "Can I ask you something?" "Of course," I said, placing a pan in the cabinet. Do you ever regret it, letting us into your life? With all this trouble with Mr. Collins? Do you ever wish you had just returned my wallet and moved on?" I stopped what I was doing and turned to him. He was watching me with those deep eyes, so serious for someone so young, and I saw all the fear and insecurity he had been carrying. I walked over and placed my hands on his shoulders. "Ethan, look at me," I said gently. He lifted his eyes. "I want you to understand something very clearly. You are not a burden. You are not a problem. You are a gift, the greatest gift I have ever received." Tears filled his eyes. "But Mr. Collins—" "Robert is a bitter man trying to cause harm because he didn't get what he wanted," I interrupted firmly. "This has nothing to do with you, and everything to do with his greed and his inability to accept his brother's choices. And you know what? Even if he succeeded in taking everything, even if I lost this house and every penny I have, I would still never regret meeting you. I would never regret letting you into my life." "Why?" Ethan whispered, tears now streaming freely down his face. "Because you reminded me what it means to be alive," I said, my own voice breaking. "Because for the first time in years, I wake up in the morning with a reason to get out of bed. Because this house is no longer a silent tomb, it's a home. Because I matter to someone, and someone matters to me. You cannot put a price on that, Ethan. You cannot measure the value of not being alone." Sarah had stopped washing dishes and was standing there, tears running down her face as well. And then the three of us were hugging in the kitchen, crying and laughing at the same time. 3 people who had found one another in the most unlikely moment, in the most unexpected way. It was that night, after Ethan had gone to bed, that Sarah and I stayed up talking, something that had also become routine. We sat in the living room, me with my chamomile tea, her with her hot chocolate, talking about everything and nothing. "You know," Sarah said, staring at the crackling fire in the fireplace, "sometimes I feel guilty for being happy, for being in this beautiful house, having enough food, not having to work myself to exhaustion. It feels like I don't deserve this." "Why wouldn't you?" I asked gently. "Because so many other people are struggling," she said. "Because there are other single mothers working 3 jobs, other children growing up in poverty, other widows dying of loneliness. Why us? Why were we saved when so many others aren't?" It was a question I had asked myself too. "I don't know," I admitted. "Maybe it's not about deserving. Maybe it's just about grace, about being in the right place at the right time, About Ethan being in that parking lot exactly when I needed him. About you having the courage to trust a stranger despite having been deceived before. I paused, thinking. Richard used to say that when we receive grace, our responsibility is to pass it on. That the best way to honor a blessing is to become a blessing to someone else. Maybe that's what we're doing for one another. Maybe that's what we can do for others too. Sarah looked at me with curiosity. What do you mean? Maybe when all this with Robert settles down, we can think about other ways to help, other families, other people struggling. Maybe create a temporary shelter. I don't know exactly yet, but I feel like this might be my purpose. This life, this second act I was given, should be about more than just me. Sarah reached out and took my hand. You are a special person, Margaret Collins. Richard must have been a very wise man to have chosen you. He was, I said softly. He really was. It was the following week that Robert's game shifted from manipulation to something far more sinister. Patricia called me on Monday morning, her voice tense. Margaret, we need to talk, in person, now, if possible. I drove to her office, my heart pounding. When I walked in, I saw several documents spread across her desk, her expression serious. What happened? I asked, sitting down. Robert submitted additional documents, she said, sliding some papers toward me. He has a witness, someone claiming to have observed concerning behavior from you. Someone saying you've been unstable, erratic, making irrational decisions. My stomach dropped. Who? Patricia hesitated. Her name is Jennifer Ashford. She says she's your neighbor and former friend. Jennifer, a woman who had been part of my social circle before Richard died, but whom I had slowly lost touch with when I withdrew into my grief and loneliness. We hadn't been particularly close, but she lived 3 houses down, and we would occasionally talk. What is she saying? I asked, my voice hoarse. That you've let the house deteriorate, that you stop strangers on the street and have conversations that don't make sense, that you've been seen crying in public multiple times, and most importantly, that you confided in her that you sometimes don't see the point in continuing to live. I went cold. That last part was true. I had said something like that to Jennifer a few months after Richard died, in a moment of deep pain. But it had been an expression of grief, not a suicidal threat, and it certainly didn't represent how I felt now. She's twisting everything, I said. She's taking moments out of context and turning them into something they weren't. I know, Patricia said, but in court, perception is reality. And Robert is building a narrative that you've been in mental decline for years, and that allowing Sarah and Ethan into your life was the final straw, the ultimate proof of impaired judgment. So what do we do? Patricia leaned back in her chair, her fingers tapping thoughtfully on her desk. We need our own witnesses, people who can attest to your current mental state, your ability to make rational decisions, the genuine nature of your relationship with Sarah and Ethan. I have Reverend Thomas, I offered. He's known me for years. Good, Patricia said, making a note. Who else? I realized with a sudden shock how isolated I had become. Aside from Richard, aside from a few casual acquaintances, I hadn't maintained close relationships. I had distant family in other states whom I saw maybe once a year. I had former co-workers I hadn't spoken to in years. I don't have many people, I admitted, shame burning my face. Patricia must have seen something in my expression because her face softened. That's okay, she said gently. Quality over quantity. Reverend Thomas is good. I also have the independent psychiatrist's report, which is excellent. You passed all cognitive assessments with distinction, showed no signs of dementia, depression, or any condition impairing your judgment. She paused. It would also help if Sarah and Ethan were willing to testify about the nature of your arrangement, what it's been like living with you, your overall mental state. I'll ask them, I said, but I don't want them to feel pressured. I understand, Patricia said. But Margaret, you need to understand something. Robert is playing dirty. He's willing to destroy your reputation, drag your name through the mud, expose every painful moment of your life if it means getting what he wants. You need to be prepared for this to get very ugly before it gets better. I nodded, swallowing the fear threatening to choke me. I'm prepared. I don't have a choice. But that night, when I told Sarah and Ethan about Jennifer and her allegations, when I saw the fear and worry on their faces, I began to wonder if I really was prepared, if any of us were. We'll testify, Sarah said immediately. We'll tell the judge exactly how things are, how kind and generous and completely rational you've been. No, I said, I can't ask that of you. If you take the stand for me, Robert will attack you too. He'll bring up the fraud investigation, try to make it look like you're manipulators, that you're only defending me because you have something to gain. I don't care, Sarah said firmly. Let him try. The truth is the truth, and the truth is that you saved us just as much as we saved you. Ethan nodded vigorously. She's right, Margaret. You've been fighting for us since the day we met. Now it's our turn to fight for you. Tears burned my eyes. How had I come so far from being a woman crying in a snow-covered parking lot? How had I become part of this small, unlikely family these people I barely knew yet loved as if they were my own blood? All right, I said finally, but only if you're sure, if you understand the risks. We're sure, they said at the same time, and despite everything, despite the fear and uncertainty, I smiled. The hearing was scheduled for the first week of February. In the weeks leading up to it, Robert intensified his campaign. Legal papers arrived every few days, each more invasive than the last. Questions about my finances, my health, my medical history. Demands for interviews with neighbors, acquaintances, anyone who might have interacted with me in the past 3 years. It was during this period that something unexpected happened. Something that would change the course of everything. It was a cold, late January afternoon. I had just returned from another meeting with Patricia, exhausted from the constant weight of the legal process, when I found Ethan sitting on the front steps, his head in his hands. Ethan, I called, rushing to him. What's wrong? Are you okay? He lifted his face, and I saw that he had been crying. In his hand, he held that old leather wallet, the same one he had lost the day we met. I found something, he said, his voice rough. Something I didn't know was there. Something my dad left for me. He opened the wallet and carefully removed the inner lining. There, hidden in a secret pocket that had clearly never been discovered, was a thin, carefully folded piece of paper. With trembling hands, Ethan unfolded it and held it out to me. It was a letter, written in a careful male handwriting, dated the day before Michael Parker's fatal accident. My dear Ethan, I began to read aloud, my own voice breaking as the words of a deceased father to his son came to life. If you are reading this, it means something has happened to me. It means I am no longer there to guide you through life, to teach you the things a father should teach his son. I am so sorry, my boy. I am sorry I am not there. But even if I am gone, I want you to know a few things. First, that I love you more than words can say, more than life itself. You and your mother are what made every day of work, every struggle, every challenge, worth it. Second, that I am incredibly proud of you. I know you will be a good man, a strong man, because you have your mother's heart and, I hope, a little of my determination. Third, and this is the most important, I want you to take care of your mother. She will try to be strong. She will try not to show her pain because that's who she is. But she will need you, Ethan. She will need your strength, your love, your presence. But Ethan, my son, it is also important that you still be a child, that you play, that you laugh, that you live. Do not let my absence steal your childhood. Promise me that. And one last thing. I believe in miracles. I believe that when it gets dark, when we think there is no way out, the universe has a way of sending light. Sometimes that light comes in the form of people who enter our lives exactly when we need them most. Do not be afraid to accept help when it comes. Do not let pride, which I know you inherited from me, keep you from accepting kindness when it is genuinely offered. Life is hard, my son. But it is also full of grace, if we are willing to see it. I love you always, Dad. The silence that followed was absolute, broken only by the sound of Ethan quietly sobbing. I sat beside him on the steps, wrapped my arm around his shoulders, and let him cry. Cry for the loss, for the pain, but perhaps also for the relief, for the comfort of knowing his father had loved him so deeply, had thought of him until the very end. When Sarah arrived home half an hour later, she found us still on the steps. And when Ethan showed her the letter, when she read those words from her deceased husband, she broke down as well. And the three of us held one another there, sharing pain, sharing love, sharing the understanding that sometimes miracles come in the most unexpected forms. Later that night, after Ethan had finally gone to sleep, exhausted from the emotional storm, Sarah and I stayed up in the kitchen. He knew, Sarah said softly, her hands wrapped around a mug of cold tea. Michael knew something might happen to him. His job was dangerous, and he wanted to make sure Ethan would have his words, his guidance, even if he was gone. It was a beautiful gift, I said. Painful, but beautiful. Sarah nodded, then looked at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. You realize, don't you? What Michael wrote about miracles, about people entering our lives when we need them most. He was talking about you. He knew someone like you existed, even without ever meeting you. My tears finally spilled over. Or maybe he was preparing Ethan to recognize a miracle when he saw one, to not let pride stop him from accepting help. Maybe it's both, Sarah said. Maybe it's destiny, or God, or just extraordinary luck. But whatever it is, I'm grateful, so incredibly grateful. So am I whispered. So am I. It was that letter, that final gift from a deceased father to his son, that gave me the strength I needed to face the hearing ahead. If Michael Parker could believe in miracles, if he could have faith that light would come even in the darkest hours, then so could I. The morning of the hearing dawned cold and gray, snow beginning to fall lightly as we drove to the courthouse. Patricia met us outside the building, professional and confident in her immaculate suit. Remember, she said, looking at Sarah, Ethan, and me, be honest, be direct, and don't let Robert intimidate you. He will try to make you lose your temper. He will try to twist your words. Don't fall for it. We nodded, and then we went in. The courtroom was smaller than I expected, less dramatic. Just the judge, a middle-aged man with thick-rimmed glasses and a weary expression, a few court staff, Robert and his attorney on one side, us on the other. But the atmosphere was charged, heavy with the weight of what was about to happen. Robert's attorney went first, painting a portrait of me I barely recognized. An elderly woman, alone and vulnerable, who had fallen into deep depression after her husband's death. A woman who had become an easy target for opportunists, who had made irrational and potentially dangerous choices by allowing strangers with questionable pasts to live in her home. A woman who, though well-intentioned, was clearly no longer capable of making sound decisions about her own life. Then Jennifer Ashford testified, repeating the claims she had made in her statement. Yes, she had seen Margaret deteriorate after Richard's death. Yes, she had heard Margaret express despair. Yes, she was concerned for Margaret's safety. But when Patricia began her cross-examination, things started to unravel. Mrs. Ashford, Patricia said, her voice calm but sharp, you stated that you were a close friend of Margaret. How many times did you visit her home in the past year? Jennifer hesitated. Well, not that many times. She kind of withdrew. How many times? Patricia pressed. Maybe 2 or 3 times. 2 or 3 times in an entire year, yet you consider yourself a close friend. I tried to see her, but she always seemed busy. And these conversations where Margaret supposedly expressed despair and irrational thoughts, when exactly did these occur? Right after Richard died. Maybe 3 years ago. 3 years ago, Patricia repeated, letting the words hang in the air. And since then, have you had any conversations with Margaret where she expressed similar feelings? Well, not exactly, but yes or no, Mrs. Ashford? No? So, to be clear, you are basing your assessment of Margaret's current mental state on conversations that occurred 3 years ago, during the initial period of grief following a traumatic loss. I suppose so. Patricia then moved on to Margaret's bank records, showing that every account was perfectly organized, every bill paid on time. She presented the psychiatrist's report, which assessed Margaret as fully competent. She called Reverend Thomas, who testified about my renewed involvement in the church community, my clarity of thought, my obvious happiness with the new living arrangement. And then she called Sarah to the stand. Robert smiled, clearly thinking he would dismantle Sarah, but Patricia had prepared her well. Mrs. Parker, Robert's attorney began during cross-examination, is it true that you were investigated for insurance fraud? Yes, Sarah said calmly. And it was concluded that I committed no crime, that I was actually the victim of someone attempting to recruit me into a fraud scheme, which I refused. But you experienced financial difficulties after your husband's death. I did, like many widows. And when Margaret offered to let you live in her house rent-free, didn't you see that as an opportunity too good to pass up? Sarah looked directly at Robert, her voice steady. I saw it for exactly what it was, a kind, lonely woman offering help to people who were struggling. And in return, we gave her companionship, purpose, a reason to wake up in the morning. I see nothing irrational about 2 adults entering into a mutually beneficial arrangement. But you barely knew her. And how long do you need to know someone to recognize kindness? Sarah interrupted, her voice rising slightly. How long do you need to know someone to see that they are hurting and need human connection just as much as you do? My son helped Margaret at her lowest moment. Not for money, not for gain, but because it was the right thing to do. And Margaret returned that kindness in the same spirit. There is nothing sinister about that. There is only humanity. Then it was Ethan's turn, and when he took the stand, when Robert's attorney tried to intimidate him, it was as if Michael Parker were there, giving his son the strength he needed. Mr. Parker, Robert's attorney began condescendingly, you realize that your relationship with Margaret could be influencing your judgment. Of course it influences it, Ethan said clearly. She's part of my family now. Families influence each other. That's what being a family means. But you barely know her. I know her, Ethan said firmly. I know she wakes up every morning at 6:30. I know she takes her coffee with only 1 spoon of sugar. I know she still cries sometimes when she looks at pictures of her husband. But now the crying is gentle, not the desperate sobbing it used to be. I know she reads before bed, always mysteries, and falls asleep with the book on her face. I know she is kind and fair and treats my mother with respect and dignity. I know she made me feel safe for the first time since my father died. He paused, looking directly at Robert. And I know you're trying to take that away from us because you're jealous that your brother loved Margaret more than he loved you. But the problem isn't her. The problem is you. A murmur rippled through the courtroom. Robert's attorney turned red. The judge struck his gavel. Order, he said, but I saw something like approval in his eyes when he looked at Ethan. When it was finally my turn to testify, I took the stand with shaking legs, but my head held high. Patricia guided me through basic questions about my finances, my health, my decision-making processes. Then she asked the question that truly mattered. Margaret, why did you invite Sarah and Ethan to live with you? I took a deep breath. Because I was dying, I said simply. Not physically, but in every other way that matters. I was dying of loneliness, of lack of purpose, of living in a silent tomb of memories. And then Ethan appeared, this 13-year-old boy with a thin coat and a huge heart, and helped me when he didn't have to. He refused money because he wasn't helping for gain, but because it was the right thing to do. I paused, wiping away tears that had begun to fall. My husband Richard used to say that when you have the ability to help someone, you have the responsibility to do so. And I had been ignoring that responsibility for 3 years. So when I found Ethan's wallet, when I saw how much that money meant to him, when I met Sarah and understood her struggles, I saw an opportunity, not to be a savior, but to be saved, to give my life purpose by making a difference in theirs. And do you consider this decision rational? Patricia asked. I consider it the most rational decision I've ever made, I said firmly. What is the point of having a large house if it sits empty? What is the point of having financial resources if you never use them to do good? What is the point of living if you are only existing? Then Robert's attorney had his turn with me. He tried to confuse me with questions about finances, to make me seem forgetful or disoriented. But Patricia had prepared me well, and I had my records, my evidence, my clear mind. Aren't you concerned, he finally asked, clearly frustrated, that these people may be taking advantage of you? No, I said simply, because I know the difference between being used and being loved. And for the first time in 3 years, I feel loved again. The closing statements were brief. Robert's attorney tried to reinforce his narrative of a vulnerable woman making irrational decisions. Patricia methodically dismantled each argument, pointing out the lack of any real evidence of incompetence, the abundance of evidence of competence, and the obviously greed-driven nature of Robert's action. Then the judge spoke. I will take the matter under advisement, he said. You will have my decision within a week. That week was the longest of my life. Patricia assured me we had a strong case, but uncertainty gnawed at me. What if the judge ruled in Robert's favor? What if I lost not only my house, but Sarah and Ethan as well? It was Sarah who kept me grounded during that week. Whatever the decision, she said one night, it won't change what we shared. It won't change the fact that you changed our lives. If we have to leave, we'll carry that with us, and we'll always be grateful. But I don't want you to leave, I whispered. We don't want to either, she said, taking my hand. But sometimes life doesn't give us what we want. Sometimes it gives us what we can endure, and then asks us to be strong enough to carry it. On Friday, 1 week after the hearing, Patricia called. We have the decision, she said, her voice carefully neutral. Can you come to my office? I drove there with Sarah and Ethan, my heart pounding so loudly I thought it might burst out of my chest. When we entered Patricia's office, she was standing by the window, looking out. She turned when we came in, and I saw something on her face I couldn't immediately identify. Then she smiled, a wide, genuine smile that lit up her entire face. You won, she said simply. The judge dismissed Robert's petition entirely. He said there was absolutely no evidence of mental incompetence, that Margaret's decision to share her home was not only rational, but admirable, and that Robert's petition was clearly motivated by personal greed rather than genuine concern for his sister-in-law's well-being. My legs gave out, and I found myself sitting heavily in a chair, tears streaming down my face. Sarah was crying too, hugging Ethan, who was laughing and crying at the same time. There's more, Patricia said, still smiling. The judge also strongly criticized Robert for bringing a frivolous petition, and he did something quite unusual. He included in his decision a statement about the kind of family the three of you have created, about how it is an example of compassion and human kindness. It's quite beautiful, actually. She handed me the decision, and through my tears, I read the judge's words. Words about family being as much about choice as blood. Words about the importance of community and human connection. Words about how sometimes miracles come in the form of people entering our lives exactly when we need them most. The same words Michael Parker had written to his son. That night, we celebrated, not with anything extravagant, just dinner at home, the three of us sitting around the dining table that had been empty for so long. Sarah had made Ethan's favorite meal, spaghetti and meatballs. We had candles lit, soft music playing, laughter filling the house. To miracles, I said, raising my glass of wine. To family, Sarah said, lifting her glass of iced tea. To second chances, Ethan said, raising his soda. The months that followed were the happiest I had had in years. Sarah took on not just household management tasks, but became my true companion, my confidant, my closest friend. Ethan blossomed in ways his mother said she had never seen before. His grades improved. He joined the school baseball team. He smiled more, laughed more, seemed lighter in ways that only come from no longer carrying the weight of the world on young shoulders. And me, well, I was alive again, truly alive. Not just going through the motions, not just existing from one day to the next, but engaged with life in ways I had forgotten were possible. Robert never returned. I heard through the grapevine that he had moved to another city, started over somewhere else. Part of me felt sorry for him, for a man so consumed by bitterness and envy that he couldn't see the goodness right in front of him. But mostly, I just felt grateful that he was gone, that he could no longer cast his shadow over the lives we were building. It was in December, almost exactly 1 year since that day in the snow-covered parking lot, that something special happened. Something that brought everything full circle. It was December 21st again. Sarah, Ethan, and I were decorating the Christmas tree, the house filled with carols and the smell of cookies baking in the oven. On that Christmas Eve, 1 year and 3 days after Ethan had helped me with a dropped grocery bag, we all gathered around the Christmas tree. "A year ago," I began, my voice breaking slightly. "I was alone in this house, just existing, waiting to die. Then a 13-year-old boy with a huge heart helped me at my lowest moment, and that single act of kindness, that small miracle, set off a chain reaction that changed everything." "Cheers," we all said together, our voices blending in perfect harmony. As for Ethan, he grew. Not just physically, though he had a growth spurt that made him taller than his mother, but emotionally, intellectually, spiritually. He blossomed into a young man with purpose and direction, confidence and kindness. And when he graduated high school, when he gave his valedictorian speech, he told the story of a winter day when he helped a woman in a parking lot, and how that small act changed not only her life, but his as well. If you made it to the end of this story, if you listened all the way through, thank you. From the bottom of my heart, thank you. Because telling this story, sharing this journey, is not just about me, it's about all of us, about every lonely person waiting for connection, about every family struggling just to survive, about every moment when we can choose to see someone in need and respond with kindness. So if this story touched you in any way, if it made you think about your own connections, your own choices, your own opportunities to be a miracle for someone else, please leave a like. Not for me, but so this message can reach others who need to hear it. Share in the comments what touched you most. Because when we share our stories, when we allow ourselves to be vulnerable and honest, we create space for others to do the same. And if you're feeling alone today, if you're struggling, if you're wondering whether things will get better, I want you to know something. They will. Not in the way you expect, not on the timeline you want, but they will. Because miracles happen. Kind people exist. And sometimes, when you least expect it, when you're at your lowest point, someone will appear and extend a hand, and everything will change. Be that person for someone else. Be the miracle someone needs. Because you never know when a small act of kindness, helping someone with a grocery bag in a snow-covered parking lot, will turn into something much bigger, much more beautiful than you could ever imagine. Merry Christmas, no matter when you're listening to this. And remember, it's never too late to begin again. It's never too late to open your heart. It's never too late to choose love over fear, hope over despair, connection over isolation. Because in the end, that's what matters. Not the money we accumulate, not the things we own, not the successes we achieve. It's the lives we touch, the hearts we heal, the connections we make. It's the family we choose, the kindness we share, the love we give freely without expecting anything in return. Thank you for listening.